A thin wind combed through Maple Street as evening settled, and Evelyn clutched her coat at the throat. The Walgreens sign hummed in pink neon, throwing soft light onto the wet sidewalk. She tried to swallow the lump rising again. You won't believe what happened to her heart that night. She wasn't new to sorrow, not by a long shot. A widow, a mother, a woman who'd learned to keep lists and keep going. Tonight, though, the lists failed and the going stopped. Right there by the pharmacy doors, tears finally won. Hey, before we go any further, if stories like this speak to you, would you mind subscribing and tapping the little bell? It helps more than you know, and I'd love to walk through this journey. With you, no rush, no pressure, just neighbors on the same street. Cars hissed past, like quiet shushing, and the crosswalk blinked red to white to red again. The flag on the corner gas station clicked against its pole. Somewhere, a dog barked twice, then quit. Evelyn pressed her palm to that stubborn ache, the one you don't show in daylight. What nobody knew was how ordinary things had been carrying extraordinary weight. The cracked mug at home, the fridge calendar crowded with doctor notes, that voicemail she never dared to open. A name she hadn't said out loud for far too long. She whispered, "Lord, help," because fancy prayers felt like too much. Scripture flickered up from memory like a candle that still remembers how to burn. He calls us by name, doesn't he? That thought warmed her fingers more than her gloves did. A cluster of teens laughed by the bus stop, and Evelyn looked down. Not wanting to be seen, no one meant harm. Still, grief can make you feel invisible. She pretended to check her purse so they'd pass without a glance. Her mind jumped to a breakfast years back oatmeal. Cinnamon, sun on the sink. A chair that stayed empty even when the toast popped. We'll be okay, she had promised. The quiet. Promises are brave until the night comes knocking. There'd been church potlucks, 2 potato salad, ham, a sheet cake with wonky icing. Evelyn smiled at the memory of Mrs. Carter's laugh. Back then, it looked like life would soften again. Back then, hope felt like a porch light you could switch on. She tried to move, but her legs said, "Give me a minute." So she settled. On the cold bench, coat tucked under, purse, a pillow at her side, the neon buzzed a low lullaby. Tears slowed to a truce. People drifted by in the way cities do, present and far, all at once. A young dad with a stroller, a nurse in navy scrubs, a delivery guy balancing boxes like a circus act. None of them knew the history sitting on that bench. "Chin up, kiddo," she heard her mother say from some old, sturdy part of her soul. It made her smile in spite of herself. Funny how the right words show up late and still on time. She pulled her shoulders back. The air tasted like snow, thinking about it. Streetlights popped on one by one, pearls on an invisible chain. Walgreens doors whooshed open, then shut, then open again. Every sound felt like a sentence, waiting for its verb. Evelyn's fingers curled around a wrinkled envelope in her coat pocket. The paper had gotten soft from all the folding. She never mailed it, though she rehearsed the route to the post office in her head. The words inside could still cut or heal. You wouldn't believe how quiet the heart gets when it tiptoes around regret. There'd been that winter argument. Clumsy words, heavier than snow. A door closed hard, not just in the house, but in the spirit. They both heard it. She reached for her phone, then let it fall back into the purse. Too many drafts, too many almosts. The battery icon stared back like a tired eye. Maybe tonight wasn't about screens at all. "Our Father," she breathed, letting the familiar rhythm guide the fractured places. "Give me daily bread and maybe a crumb of courage. Forgive me as I forgive. Let me hear what I need to hear." From somewhere up the block, a few notes of Amazing Grace floated out, thin and brave. Maybe a radio in the pharmacy. Maybe a choir. Across town, with windows cracked, the melody threaded the chill like a hand finding hers. A minivan rolled by, and Evelyn thought she saw Linda from the library at the wheel. She lifted her hand, then lowered it. The van kept going. You can be surrounded and still feel like a lone lighthouse. She remembered the veteran outside the VA clinic, the way his hands shook as he lit a cigarette. She'd wanted to say something kind and didn't. That missed moment pricked now, nudging her forward. Mercy is a habit you have to practice. Evelyn. The name arrived in her mind first, like a stone dropped into still water. Not out loud, and yet it rippled. She blinked, listening with more than ears. Was that memory, or something more? She turned, heartbeat knocking, half expecting someone. To be right there, only a tabby cat trotted along the curb, tail bold as a flag. She almost laughed. "Get a grip," she told herself. "You're fine." Still, Goosebumps told another story. What if, she wondered, you could step out of your sorrow like a coat and hang it on a hook? What if you could walk 1 block lighter? The thought shone like a dime on the sidewalk. She pocketed it for later. She stood, smoothing the coat, and noticed the fine crack in the bench slat. How many souls had paused here with heavy news? Maybe benches are altars in disguise. Maybe this one was. Tonight, the street lamp flickered, then steadied as if making up its mind. Evelyn felt that same wobble inside her chest. Decide, it seemed to say, decide to hope, decide to listen. Isaiah's words surfaced, gentle as a nurse's hand. I have called you by name. You are mine. Catholics and evangelicals alike cling to that promise, she thought. So did she. It settled like a shawl across her shoulders. A pickup slowed near the corner. Window cracked, country music drifting. You okay, ma'am? The driver asked, kind but cautious. I'm all right, she said, surprised to hear how steady she sounded. He nodded and rolled on. The knight took a deep breath, the kind you hear more than feel. Evelyn's senses sharpened the hum of the sign, the whisper of tires, the faint clink of a shopping cart. Something was moving toward her, and not just wind. She felt it before she would ever hear it, like the hush before a choir hits the note. Her name gathered itself somewhere just beyond the corner. Her heart rose to meet it. Hope stood up too. A shiver traveled her spine, not from cold this time, but recognition. It was the feeling you get when you're about to open a long-ignored door. The latch lifted in her spirit. The hallway beyond smelled like home. She drew one more breath, slow and sure, and turned her face toward the sound the night was almost brave enough to make. It hovered there, ready? She was too. What happened next would change everything, just not here, not yet. The name landed again, rich and steady, as if the night itself had learned to speak. Evelyn. Not loud, not harsh, but sure. Like a hand cupped around a candle. She froze by the Walgreens doors, keys chiming once in her palm. You won't believe what happened to her heartbeat then. She turned slow, expecting what? Exactly? A neighbor? A prank? An echo? The sidewalk held only a ripple of air and a cat slipping into the alley. Still, the sound hung there, gentle as a porch light left on. Who's there? She asked, not wanting the words to fly too far. Her voice came out even a surprise she decided to keep. The crosswalk clicked to walk. Then don't walk. Like a metronome keeping time for her breath. She tasted snow close by. Evelyn, the voice said again, warmer now, as if it remembered birthdays and lullabies. It rolled through the chilly, block-like church bells wandering. She felt known, not scanned, seen, not evaluated. That's rare. What nobody knew was how many nights she'd prayed to be called by name again. Not ma'am, not hey, not customer, just Evelyn. The way her mother used to say it, when the world hurt less. Tears rose and didn't sting this time. Her mind flew to a Sunday long ago sermon about young Samuel. Speak, for your servant is listening. The pastor had said right there at First Church with the squeaky pew, Catholics and evangelicals. Nodded together that day. She nods now without meaning to. I'm listening, she whispered, hand flat over her coat buttons. The words steadied her like the rail on a hospital stairwell. She didn't want fancy, she wanted true. The wind settled to hear 2 footsteps, maybe, or the soft drum of her own pulse in her ears. The street lamp haloed the corner in a thin gold silhouette, shifted near the newspaper box, then vanished. The night was playing peekaboo with her courage. The voice didn't rush. I know. Your long mile, it said, almost smiling. I know your promises at the kitchen table. Evelyn blinked hard. Who talks like that? Who knows like that? Surprise trembled into her fingers. You don't have to be afraid, it added, low and plain. Not a command, more like a permission. Fear not. She'd heard those words 1,000 ways. In mass, in revivals, in hospital waiting rooms. Tonight, they fit. You won't believe this, but her shoulders dropped as if someone untied a knot from behind. The world stayed the same and also shifted a hair toward mercy. The neon hummed its old lullaby, now kinder somehow. She exhaled a winter cloud. What do you want from me? She asked, surprised at how direct it sounded. The cat reappeared, sat and blinked like a tiny usher. Evelyn laughed once, brief and real. Even small things can hold a blessing. First, the voice said, I want you to remember. It carried no scold, only invitation. Remember the ordinary, the mug, the list on the fridge, the library steps that know your shoes. Her breath snagged on a memory she hadn't touched. And second, it continued. I want you to listen for your own courage. Not anyone else's, the neighbors or the pastors, or the lady on the prayer chain. Yours? The word yours fit like a coat that finally zipped. She closed her eyes and saw the shoebox in the hall closet. Letters, soft at the folds. Unsent, unforgiven. Hope cleared its throat, but regret tried to talk over it. The voice waited, patient as a nurse. What nobody knew, the narrator in her mind said, was that the next thing would undo years. She almost shushed herself. But the night wouldn't be shushed. Surprise was already walking up the block. In snow boots, an old pickup idled at the light, heater rattling, Hank Williams low on the radio. The driver glanced, said, "Need help?" She shook her head, and he tipped his cap anyway. Kindness kept watch from the cab. "Evelyn May," the voice said, softer, fuller. Her middle name touched a place only family and God ever reached. Her knees wobbled, then locked steady. She didn't ask how it knew. She asked what it meant. "Why now?" she said, palms open at her sides. "Why here?" Walgreens doors whooshed behind her, releasing the warm antiperspirant smell. Somewhere, a cart clinked home. The world carried on like nothing special was happening because you asked. The voice answered matter of fact, as a good nurse, because you're ready. Ready? She wanted to argue, to submit a list of reasons she was not. The list stayed in her pocket, unconvincing even to itself. "You'll walk back through your days," it went on, "and find what you think you lost." The words were not a map, more like a compass. North hummed somewhere near her sternum. She could feel it, ridiculous and real. And the most amazing thing of all, the voice promised, is that the small will redeem the large. Small? What? Small kindnesses, small calls, small crusts of bread. She pictured the veteran at the VA bench, the bag of groceries she could still deliver. She thought of Michael then. Not like a wound, but like a door she might open without breaking. "What about my son?" Her question floated up, fragile and brave. The streetlight seemed to lean closer. "Remember him true?" the voice said. "Not as a failure, not as a fight, but as a boy you taught to tie his shoes. Call him by name. The way I call you by yours." Evelyn swallowed hope. Like medicine that finally tastes sweet. "Am I?" she started, then stopped. "Am I hearing you? Am I losing it? Am I safe?" The unasked questions hung like ornaments waiting for a tree. The voice let them shine without answering just yet. She braced for thunder, for flashing lights, for spectacle. None came. Only the simple presence of being known on a Wednesday night near a pharmacy. Surprise doesn't need fireworks to be holy. "Take the letter," it said, "and walk. Not far, not dramatic. Just from here to the corner. From the corner to the diner. From the diner to the bridge. A pilgrimage of blocks." She could do blocks. Her feet agreed before her mind signed the permission slip. Step, breath, step. The cat rose and fell into pace like a guardian with whiskers. Evelyn smiled again, and it didn't feel like borrowed light. "Bless those who cross your path," the voice added, as if tipping her pockets with small coins. "Offer what you have, carry what you can. I'll handle what you can't." The promise settled like warm bread in a cold kitchen. "You'll tell me who you are," she whispered, childlike for a beat. The night paused, considering. "No, when it matters," it said. The answer was not a tease. It was a kindness she didn't yet understand. She reached for the envelope and felt its softness against her glove. "Letters, remember, finger heat." She held it to her chest, not to clutch, but to claim. Somewhere, a choir practiced Amazing Grace, verse by verse. "Walk with me," the voice said finally, and the words were less instruction than companionship. She nodded like you do at a friend who shows up with soup. The air tasted less like snow now, more like rain that waters gardens. Evelyn stepped off the curb toward the corner, toward the diner lights, toward the line of ordinary places brimming with unnamed rescue. Her name kept echoing, quiet as breath, steady as a drum. And from here, memory began to open doors she hadn't touched in years. Morning came the way it always does on Maple Street, soft and stubborn. The kettle clicked, and the chipped blue mug waited like an old friend. Evelyn measured the coffee by memory, not spoons. Steam braided up, and the day began its quiet drumbeat. You won't believe how loud ordinary can be. The radio mumbled a weather update and a hymn from a station out of Columbus. A fridge magnet with a faded verse held a grocery list like a promise. She traced the edges of the paper, stalling, steadying, breath in, breath out, the way nurses teach. Peace came in sips. On Tuesdays, she used to read at the library, story hour under murals of sky. Tiny hands clapped for the part with the duck. Every time. She remembered stamping the same card year after year. The steps out front still new. Her shoes. That memory stood when other things fell. Church potluck stitched the seasons together, potato salad, deviled eggs, shy laughter. Mrs. Carter brought a Jell-O mold that wobbled like it had opinions. Father Thomas and Pastor Jim traded jokes by the coffee urn. Catholics and evangelicals stacked folding chairs as one. The hymn lingered longer than dessert. At Kroger, the fluorescent lights hummed like bees with good gossip. She checked coupons. Wade Apples smiled at Jasmine, the cashier with the braided bun. A toddler reached for a cereal box with a tiger on it. Evelyn handed it down and earned a thank you whisper. Small mercies stalked the cart. Laundry day made the house smell clean and brave. Towels rolled like clouds on the couch, soft and obedient. She matched socks while the news muttered about faraway storms. The flag on the porch clicked calmly against its pole. Ordinary held the line. On the mantel, a photograph caught sun at the edges. There was Robert with the lopsided grin and Michael with grass-stained knees. She could hear the backyard again. The thump of a basketball. The shout when the hoop finally forgave the ball. "Tie it tight, buddy," she used to say. Memory tied knots that held Dot at the post office. The line curled like a clever snake. Stamp designs displayed birds, flags, and a famous poet. Her fingers found the envelope in her purse and then fled. Not today, she told herself. For the 1000th not today. She bought stamps anyway, as if courage came in sheets. The diner on Cedar had pie that healed better than time. Linda always asked for extra whipped cream and extra truth. They split the check and the worries half and half. "Call him," Linda would say, like a mantra with syrup. Evelyn nodded and changed the subject to weather. Outside the VA clinic, a veteran with a winter beard warmed his hands around a paper cup. She wanted to offer a ride or a sandwich or both. The light turned green before she chose that moment. Pricked later, soft but sharp. Regret remembers the exact street corner. Dot. At the Saturday market, peaches perfumed the air like a hymn. "You can eat." A farmer in a John Deere cap weighed her bag and threw in an extra tomato. For sauce, he winked, like they were co-conspirators in kindness. She tucked it carefully beside the bread. Grace sneaks in brown paper by the bus stop, and exhausted, grandmother juggled a stroller and a grocery bag breaking at the seams. Evelyn stepped in without ceremony, hand steady, voice warm. "Let me help, honey." The bag survived. The baby gurgled. The world tilted mercifully. She walked away lighter. Then the bag had been Dot in the backyard. The garden asked for attention, and she obliged. Weeds surrendered to patient fingers. Tiny green tomatoes hid like shy children behind leaves. She thought about the seed stories Jesus told, the ones where small things change everything. Soil under nails felt like prayer you could touch. First, snow came silently like a neighbor with stew. She pulled a quilt from the cedar chest, one square for each year she'd loved and lost. The shepherd's psalm rose without permission, carrying warmth. She whispered the lines that follow valleys. Winter listened at the window and nodded. The phone held a voicemail she had not played. A sealed room at the edge of the house. She scrolled. Past it every night. Careful as a nurse around a tender bruise. The date stamped, there was a calendar she didn't flip. Her heart knocked once, twice, then folded its hands. Not yet. That chipped mug again. The one Robert chipped fixing the porch railing. She liked the flaw, a tiny lighthouse of memory. Coffee ring halos formed and vanished on the table. Ordinary miracles are like that: arrive, teach, evaporate, leave warmth behind. She kept watch anyway. The shoebox in the hall closet rustled without moving. Letters lay inside, gently frayed at the folds, ink holding fast. She'd named the box later once, then stopped naming it at all. Dust settled like snow on its lid. The path to it seemed longer than the hall. Library steps. Summer heat, a boy with freckles asking for help printing a baseball schedule. She had smiled and asked his name and listened like it mattered. After he left, she imagined Michael at the same age. All elbows and hope. The echo made her catch her breath at First Church. Candles flickered like shy stars under the vaulted ceiling. She knelt on wood that had survived countless knees. "Forgive us," she said, meaning more than one thing, more than one person. Beside her, a woman crossed herself with slow confidence. Together, they laid their weight on mercy. A Target aisle offered everything and nothing at once. She reached for laundry soap and heard a child call Mom. It wasn't for her, but her body turned anyway, a reflex older than grief. The child reunited with his mother by the end cap of snacks. Evelyn put the soap in her cart like a benediction. At the laundromat on High Street, machines churned like a choir with rhythm. A stranger folded tiny pajamas and told a story about a grandson in Texas. Evelyn shared a small smile and a larger listening. The woman exhaled like a balloon that had finally been untied. 2 people lighter, and nobody knew why. The park path along the creek held geese like opinionated elders. Evelyn walked slow, counting breaths, letting the water talk. Isaiah's river words surfaced when you passed through, not if. She touched the railing on the bridge as if it could remember her, and maybe it could. Bridges are good at that. Back by Walgreens, the neon sign buzzed, its faithful buzz. She had cried here before, and would again, and the sidewalk kept her secrets. The night of the voice hovered behind her eyes like lightning without thunder. Ordinary had been the stage for that miracle. Maybe it always is. The radio found amazing grace in a storm of static and delivered it anyway. She mouthed the first lines and felt less alone. The melody showed up like a friend with casserole. She let it in and set extra places at the table. Music, never minds. She started leaving small loaves on a neighbor's porch when the chemo schedule stretched long. No note, just bread and a ribbon with quiet faith. The neighbor waved one afternoon with damp eyes and a lifted slice. Kindness made the cul-de-sac brighter than Christmas. At the kitchen table, she pressed her palm to the wood and remembered the promise she once made to God, to forgive before bitterness set like concrete, to call people by their names when the world only offers labels, to choose blessing over winning. She wrote it down again, not to impress heaven, but to remind earth. Surprise, hid in plain sight that week, in a misdelivered catalog that actually belonged to Michael's Street. The address printed there tugged a thread she thought had snapped. She held the page longer than anyone holds junk mail. The room tilted toward a new idea. Hope cracked the window. She practiced saying his name out loud, softly at first, then steady. Michael, not a wound, a person. A boy who once chased fireflies and insisted they were tiny lanterns from God. She pictured his grin with a missing tooth, and the shoe she tied and retied. Memory released its breath. She packed her purse with the envelope and a courage that felt homemade. The route formed itself, past the diner, past the library, past the church, toward the bridge where dawn keeps its best work. Steps small, heart wide. The cat from the alley might come along, just because by evening the house exhaled a long, settled sigh. The shoebox in the hall seemed closer than it ever had. Not because it moved, but because Evelyn finally did. She reached for the closet door and let her hand rest there. Wood-warm, hinge, patient, tomorrow would have questions. Tonight would hold watch. She stood at the threshold of another ordinary day, which is to say, a day with miracles hiding in it. Lights clicked off one by one, and mercy clicked on in places she couldn't yet see. Somewhere, a choir rehearsed the verse about being found. Evelyn listened, hand on the closet, name ready on her tongue. The letters waited without hurrying, and so did Grace. The shoebox waited in the hall closet like a quiet dog that knows your footsteps. When Evelyn lifted the lid, paper scents rose up: pink, cedar, a trace of lavender from a sachet long forgotten. Envelopes lay there like small sleeping birds. Her hands hovered, listening. The first letter she touched wore a forever flag stamp, but no postmark, as if time had refused to let it go. She remembered lining up at the counter, then stepping out before her turn. Pride had sounded reasonable that day. Fear had been the better orator. Dear Michael, one envelope began, the D a little wobbly from a trembling start. She had written about the winter argument without trying to win it. She had asked for a meeting at the diner on Cedar. Then she folded the paper like a secret and backed away. You won't believe how sharp memory can be when it smells paper and ink. The argument had begun with a tiny spark, something about money and a missed call, then grew into a storm that moved furniture in the heart. A door had slammed, and not just the wooden one. Silence set like ice. She held the letter up to light and saw the faint shadows of the words. Transparent, but still true. She considered tearing it up, as if ripping paper could rewrite history. Instead, she put it down and reached for another. This one began with an apology for a voicemail she had not yet listened to. The irony stung, and then softened. She had written the apology before she knew what she was apologizing for. Faith sometimes walks ahead of understanding, waving you forward at the kitchen table. She smoothed a fresh page and watched the lines steady beneath. Her hand, the mug ring on the wood, looked like a halo for ordinary things. Help me tell the truth without trying to be right, she prayed. Honest words or none. She jotted story scraps to practice humility. The shoe she tied 1,000 times. The night he stayed up sick and she laid cool cloths on his forehead. The time he rescued a stray dog and named it Lucky because hope requires naming. The pen slowed at each kindness dot from the bottom of the box. A thin postcard shuffled forward. A boy's handwriting lived there, big loops and straight determination. To Mom, it said, with a drawing of a stick figure under a sun the size of joy. The postscript read, I hear you. She sat back, breath snagging. Surprise came through that little card like a sunrise sneaking past blinds. She had forgotten it, or rather, grief had buried it under layers of careful. The card changed the temperature in the room. She pressed it to her chest and felt years melt a degree. She reached for her phone and hovered over the unplayed message. Again, not yet, she told herself, not because she was avoiding, but because she was preparing. Some doors open best after prayer. Some words require a cleared table. Linda's name popped up with a text full of capital letters and heart emojis. Pie at the diner tonight, it said, my treat. Evelyn smiled and pictured the whipped cream like winter hills. She typed back, "Maybe." Then she added, "I found the box, back to paper." "Michael," she wrote, "I've been wrong in ways I only now understand." She listed none of the reasons, only the regret and the love. She asked for a small meeting in a public place, safe and kind, no heavy words unless both agreed. The envelope sighed like relief. She remembered the veteran on the bench outside the clinic and pulled a new card. "Thank you," she wrote, not knowing his name. Leaving it at the front desk with a note that read, "For the gentleman with the winter beard," it felt like warming her own hands, too. The post office waited with its brass boxes and helpful posters. She walked there in her mind, seeing the blue mailbox like a friendly mouth ready to carry burdens. She rehearsed, sliding the letter through, and hearing the clink that says, "Now it's moving." Rehearsal counts as courage practice. A hymn from somewhere in the house found her. The one about amazing grace that still teaches old hearts new steps. She hummed the first line, then the second. Catholics and evangelicals sing it with the same ache, she thought. The song widened the room. She wrote a letter to God she would never mail, though he reads mail before it's written. "Search me," she borrowed, "and lead me where mercy holds." She asked for the patience to listen longer than she spoke, for the gentleness to call by name rather than by fault. An envelope addressed to herself appeared. Written on a spring day after the funeral, "Be kind to the woman in this body." It said, "Feed her, walk her, let her rest." She traced the lines like a blessing she had forgotten to receive. Then she folded it back with care. On the inside flap of one letter, she had scribbled a grocery list that ended with the word, "Forgiveness, eggs, milk, bread, forgiveness." She laughed softly at the domestic holiness of it. Maybe grace really does arrive on ordinary shelves. The cat from the alley slid through the open door as if invited and settled on the chair opposite. "All right," she said, "you can be my committee." The cat blinked approval. Decisions felt lighter with an audience that purred instead of judged. She laid out a few envelopes like place settings. One for her son, one for Linda, one for the neighbor in chemo, one for the veteran. A tiny banquet of words waited on the table. She fetched the good pen, the one that glides and never scratches. The letter for Linda said, "Thank you for telling me to call him, even when I changed the subject to weather." The letter for the neighbor said, "Bread again Wednesday and I can drive if you're weary." The veteran's card said, simply, "Seen." Sometimes less is the most. She tucked stamps into the corner of each, as if fastening hope. The flag on the tiny square looked back at her like a brave friend. She remembered the pledge in a school gym and the way voices rise together in promises. Community loves a chorus. At the bottom of the box, something else, glinted a key on a ribbon from a long-ago locker at the YMCA. It had no business here and too much meaning all at once. She set it aside for later. The way you set aside a dream that won't explain itself. The afternoon light shifted, gold moving to honey. She brewed fresh coffee and warmed her hands on the mug. The letters watched her like well-behaved children waiting to be chosen for recess. Paper can be patient. Hearts less so. She tried to picture Michael's face, now older, changed, still him. Freckles faded, jaw firmer, eyes the same stormy blue as when he insisted fireflies were lanterns from God. Her mouth formed his name and it felt like prayer that had finally found its rhythm. The envelope with his name went into her purse with her wallet and lip balm and worry. It nestled there like a small, brave thing asking for a window seat. The purse felt heavier and right. A weight you choose can be a kind of strength. She stood, pushed the chair in and straightened the stack. That would go out tomorrow. The cat stretched and left the room like a satisfied usher. The house breathed an easy breath. The shoebox closed without offense. By the door, her coat hung ready. She slipped a hand into the pocket and found a grocery receipt with a number she did not recognize scrawled on the back. For one bright beat, she thought, could this be his? She tucked it into the purse to check later. Night sidled up to the windows, an old friend bringing stories. Evelyn touched the letters again, then turned off the kitchen light. In the quiet, a verse brushed past, "Love keeps no record of wrongs, but letters can keep records of turning back." She chose to believe both were true as she passed the table. She laid a napkin at the head like she was setting a place for someone who had not come in a long while. The chair at the corner waited. So did a promise she once made at this very table, a promise the next sunrise would ask her to remember. Morning pooled across the old oak table like honey finding its place. The grain showed little rivers where years had flowed. Evelyn set her mug down and felt the wood answer back. You won't believe how a table can remember. Today, it remembered more than breakfast. This was the battlefield and the cradle, all in one rectangle of wood. Homework, casseroles, Christmas, ribbon clippings. Laughter that shook the salt shaker and tears that salted the stew. prayers that rose like steam and cooled like mercy on a windowsill. After the funeral, she had sat right here. Hands flat, heart loud, she made a promise to God with more sincerity than polish. Forgive fast before resentment turns to concrete. Call people by name the way heaven calls me by mine. Back then, the words felt simple as flour. Today, they felt heavy as cast iron. She traced a groove left by a knife from some long-ago pie. Isaiah's whisper floated up again, called by name, not by failure. The line steadied her like a railing dot. She set the big family Bible down beside a grocery list. Eggs, milk, bread, courage. The juxtaposition made her smile. Grace and groceries share the same aisle more often than we admit. She underlined courage and poured another sip of Brave. Keep your promise. A thought nudged, gentle as a tap on the shoulder. Was it memory? Was it the voice from last night? Patient as a nurse? She didn't argue. Arguing with kindness always feels silly. She pulled a napkin and wrote names. Like you lay out place settings, Michael, Linda, Mrs. Alvarez next door, the veteran with the winter beard. Each name took a seat at the table and waited without complaint. What? Nobody knew was that the order mattered. Starting with the easy ones had kept her busy for years. Today, the napkin asked her to begin with the mountain. Michael's name looked both familiar and new, like a road repaved after a long winter. Her mind slipped back to the day the promise was born. Father Thomas had stopped by with a rosary and a pot of soup. Pastor Jim had carried folding chairs and a joke. 2 traditions, 1 tenderness. The table held all of it without squeaking. She had told them both, I want to live soft, not brittle. They nodded in 2 different accents of faith in the same grammar of love. She'd meant it then. She meant it still. Even if meaning it meant walking through hard rooms, the voice from last night threaded through the morning like a hymn that remembers its verses. Remember the ordinary, listen for your own courage. She exhaled and let the counsel land. The table felt less like wood and more like a trusted friend. You won't believe this, but the big Bible opened to a page with a tucked note. Robert's handwriting, slanted and stubborn, peered up. Don't let the sun set angry, it said, underlined twice. He had written that for a younger storm they had survived. She laughed, a small, surprised sound that cleaned the room. All right. Love, she whispered. Message received. She thought about sundowns and second chances, about how both arrive daily and get missed anyway. Not today. Our Father, she began, voice low, rhythm steady. Give me daily bread and daily mercy, too. Blessed are the peacemakers, even when their knees knock. Teach me to call by name, not by wounds. Amen. That feels like a green light. She pulled out a chair, as if for an unseen guest. The air changed temperature a hair. Honest to goodness. Catholics light candles. Evangelicals pass coffee. Today she did both, and the table called it even. Hospitality to heaven and to her own heart. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She let it pass like a cloud. Not every ring is rescue. Some days the holiest thing is to stay seated until the soul catches up. She sipped and waited for the catching. Michael, she said out loud, testing the sound like a key in a door. It fit. It turned. It didn't swing the door wide yet, but the latch lifted. Michael, she said again, softer, and the room set it back without echoing. The letter in her purse felt heavier than leather and lighter than air. She slid it out and laid it flat, palm on top. Bless this, she prayed without ceremony. Bless what it asks and what it admits. Bless the parts that tremble. Memory pulled a chair, uninvited and somehow welcome. Science fair volcanoes. That erupted frosting. Fractions that refused to behave. A shoe she tied while the bus brakes sighed outside. Love learned long division at this table and kept the remainder. She grabbed a recipe card and wrote the promise in present tense. I forgive quickly, I call by name. I bless my enemies and my own stubborn streak. I walk toward, not away. She slid the card into the tin between banana bread and pot roast. The day began laying out a route as if it had been ironing it while she slept. Diner on Cedar for pie and courage. Library steps for breathing room. First church for a candle and a hymn. Cedar Bridge at dawn for whatever waits beyond words. And the most amazing thing of Alcourage tasted like cinnamon today, not sharp, not medicinal, warm, familiar. She rolled it around like a bite of pie and let the sweetness do what sweetness does. She knew better than to ask why. She set out flour and yeast on reflex, hands remembering what comfort looks like in a loaf, bread for Mrs. Alvarez, bread for the veteran if she found him on the bench, bread to break the ice inside her own chest. Kneading made prayer visible. She reached for the phone to call Linda and then stopped at the second ring. Not yet. She wanted to arrive with something more than words. Pie is good, presence is better. She left a voicemail that sounded like a smile and hung up. A damp cloth took circles out of the wood, and she imagined she was wiping old grudges in the same motion, round and round, lighter and lighter. The table sighed, and so did she, who knew cleaning could feel like absolution. "Fear not," came again, not theatrical, just faithful. She folded a scarf, the soft gray one Michael had bought with first job money. She wrapped it around her neck like a promise returning home. Warmth, earned and gifted, the house lights flickered once, then held steady. She lit a candle anyway, just in case and just because. Flame made a small gold room on the table, bright enough for honesty, gentle enough for tears. She let both visit and didn't rush either. On the envelope she wrote, "To Michael from Mom." She paused and crossed out the from. No distance, no formality. Just Mom. Names do their best work when they travel light. The pen lifted like a baton, concluding a soft anthem. She set the YMCA key on the table, the one on the ribbon from the shoebox. "What are you about?" she asked it, half teasing. It didn't answer, of course, but meaning gathered like weather. Later, it promised without words. Later, will matter. She cracked the back door. Cold air laced the kitchen and chased off stale grief. The street lay quiet, holding its breath for the day. She smiled at the notion of a town keeping watch. Maybe. We all are, more than we admit. Alarm set for dawn, purse by the chair, coat on the hook closest to courage. She drank the last inch of coffee like a benediction. The napkin list fluttered once in the draft and settled. So did her resolve, which had been waiting years for this ordinary morning. "Walk with me," she whispered into the kitchen light, not demanding, just inviting. The cat answered with a small chirp and hopped onto the chair as if volunteering as escort. Evelyn laughed, genuine and young at the edges. The floor seemed to lean gently toward the door. She blew out the candle and the thin ribbon of smoke. Wrote a word she could almost read. Tomorrow would test the ink. Tonight would guard the page. Somewhere a choir rehearsed the verse about being led. And somewhere closer than that, footsteps were already forming the first block. Dawn slipped pale over Maple Street, the kind of light that asks questions before it answers any. Evelyn tied the gray scarf Michael once bought, and checked the letter in her purse. The air nipped but didn't bite. "Walk with me," she remembered. Curiosity clicked its seatbelt. She locked the door and felt the house bless her back. The alley cat trotted ahead like it had an itinerary. Walgreens' sign blinked "Good morning" in pink neon Morse code. Tires whispered on wet pavement. Hope laced up its shoes, dot at the corner. The crosswalk counted down in red, then offered a white figure mid-stride like a dare. She paused, listened. Somewhere inside the hush came a nudge left first. Not a shout, just a knowing. She obeyed without arguing and smiled at herself. The diner bell gave its cheerful jingle, the kind that could resuscitate a Monday. Coffee fragrance hugged the room. Linda looked up from a booth and raised both hands, like hallelujah. "Pie for breakfast," she declared. "We're not amateurs." They slid into the vinyl like old pros. Evelyn's words walked around the edges before sitting down. "Not ready for all of it," she admitted. Linda nodded as if that were a full paragraph. "Then we'll start with crumbs," her friend said, pushing over a fork. On the napkin, Linda wrote 2 lines. "You're brave. Call when ready." Below it, she scribbled her landline, the one that always answers. The kindness landed without fanfare. Evelyn tucked it under the plate like leave-on. "What nobody knew," Linda added, "is a man paid for a soldier's breakfast here yesterday and said, 'Pass it on to the next woman who looks like she's carrying a mountain.'" She winked. "You don't look like a mountain. Maybe a hill with a view." Surprise warmed the booth. "Start small," the remembered voice breathed, threading the steam from the mugs. Not a command, an invitation. Evelyn felt her shoulders release one quiet click. Don't climb Everest. Take the stairs. So she tipped big on purpose and bought the nurse in scrubs behind them a coffee for the road. The nurse blinked, then teared, then laughed. "Lord, I needed that," she said. The blessing ricocheted straight back to Evelyn's chest. Outside, the air wore a lighter face. Evelyn tucked the letter deeper so it wouldn't argue its way out. The bell jingled behind her like a benediction. Steps sounded like sentences finding verbs. The cat kept the beat. The library's brick face held morning like a secret. Children's murals waved hello from the windows. Inside, the hush felt alive, not empty. Evelyn, Marla at the desk lit up like a lamp. "We still have your story hour chair." She wandered to the kids' corner and ran a hand over a book's sturdy pages. Ducks, crayons, rhymes that still knew their way home. A little girl in pigtails asked where the frogs were. Evelyn pointed and watched delight hop across a tiny face. On a sorting cart, a donated book flashed a familiar scrawl on the flyleaf. "To Mikey, keep reading the world. Mrs. King, a memory swelled. 4th grade, a teacher who smelled like lavender. A boy who ate books for breakfast. Surprise, sat up straighter. Marla lowered her voice. Volunteer roster still has you penciled. In for Fridays if you ever want to reclaim it. Evelyn felt the pencil line like a dotted path. Put it in ink, she said before fear. Vetoed. Curiosity nodded, satisfied. She slid a fresh bookmark into the frog's book. Be strong and very kind. Handwritten alongside a small heart. Catholics and evangelicals alike whisper that to their littles. She tucked a second bookmark into her purse for a later someone seeds to scatter. The VA clinic lived a few blocks over. Brick steady, flags attentive. On the bench out front sat the Winterbeard veteran, hands around a paper cup like a campfire. Evelyn offered a warm loaf from her bag. He took it like a man receiving news. I'm Frank, he said, tearing a corner as steam rose like grace. Last week, a stranger paid my bus fare and said, watch for a woman named Evelyn. She'll show up with something warm. He grinned under the beard, didn't say bread or coffee, just warm. Her name landing in his mouth knocked gently at the door inside her. Who was the stranger? She asked, half holding her breath. Frank shrugged, didn't catch it. Voice like Sunday morning before the choir starts. Surprise, set the loaf between them like a shared story. Good, the inside voice. Approved, quiet, and pleased. Not a pat on the head, more like a hand on the shoulder. Evelyn squeezed Frank's arm and asked if he needed a ride later. Might, he said. But for now I'll share this with Joe inside. Blessing multiplied like slices. First Church opened its big red doors to a weekday stillness. Candles glowed in a side chapel, each flame a whispered name. Evelyn lit one and let her own name be called back to her without striving. Lead me, she prayed, simple as bread. Father Thomas appeared like a thoughtful comma. Then Pastor Jim like the exclamation that follows. You're early to the party, Pastor Jim teased. She brings the light, Father Thomas smiled. 2 traditions, 1 tenderness. Evelyn felt safely bracketed. I made a promise at my kitchen table, she said, voice steady, to forgive. Fast to call by name, they didn't advise so much as bless. Blessed are the peacemakers, Father said. And the persistent added pastor, she laughed and hope lifted its head in the hush after. Her name rose again, fuller now. Evelyn May, she turned, expecting someone in the narthex. Only the vestibule light flickered and steadied, yet the syllables left warmth on the wooden pew. The air itself knew her. In the hymnal pocket lay an index card she didn't put there. I have called you by name, printed in neat block letters. At the bottom, initials R.M., her breath caught Robert. Miller, her husband's exact hand, or a coincidence with good timing. Either way, it braided past and present into a single sturdy rope. She crossed the street toward the creek path, letting the water tutor her thoughts. Bridges do their best work without speeches. Cedar Bridge arched ahead, patient as an old friend. She touched the rail and felt an almost electric yes. On the way home, she passed the YMCA brick proud, windows square as choir robes. The ribboned key in her pocket warmed against her palm. Inside, a young man at the desk, Derek, clicked up with Sports Channel cheer. Can I help you, ma'am? She laid the key on the counter like a puzzle piece. Vintage, Derek grinned. We swapped most locks, but we keep a few for the sentimental crowd. Kara, our manager, can check the archives in the morning. Morning, the word rang like a bell you ring on purpose. Come at 8, he added. She loves a good mystery. Evelyn thanked him and slid the key back into her pocket, where it hummed with unsaid meaning. Surprise had put a pin in the map. Tomorrow would tug the thread. The route home past the library again, then the diner where new pie cooled in the window. Evelyn left exact change under a salt shaker for the next tired soul, just because. Small coins sang louder than they looked. The bell blessed her once more. Mrs. Alvarez's porch lay quiet. Chemo calendar taped crooked on the doorframe. Evelyn set a warm loaf by the mat with a ribbon and a note that said, bread again Wednesday. Ride if you need. The house seemed to ease its shoulders by the time Maple Street found her feet again. Curiosity had grown taller. Surprise had left footprints, and hope had warmed its hands. She touched the letter in her purse like you touch a baby's back, gentle. Encouraging, patient, the alley cat angled toward home, tail like a flag of truce. At her kitchen table, the candle waited, wick remembering flame. She didn't strike a match yet. She wanted the quiet to finish speaking. Start small, she repeated, tasting the truth like cinnamon. And from that taste, small mercies began, stitching themselves end to end, preparing the way for what comes next. Morning rolled in with a soft drum beat and a to-do list scribbled on a receipt. Evelyn added one more line, practice kindness on purpose. It sounded small, like a pin, yet it held heavy things. She packed bread, spare gloves, and a handful of bus tokens. Curiosity buttoned her coat. Before stepping out, she threaded a needle and mended a loose sleeve. 1, 2, 3 neat stitches. Tug, tie, mend what's in front of you, she whispered, half prayer, half plan. The sleeve lay smooth again. Maybe people could too. She drew a kindness map across town in her mind. Diner library. VA clinic, Mrs. Alvarez's porch. No grand speeches, just small mercies with names. She tucked 2 coffee gift cards beside the letter in her purse. Surprise likes to travel with company. At the bus stop, the grandmother from last week wrestled a stroller and a paper bag. Let me help, honey, Evelyn said, stepping in gently. A plastic hook clipped the bag to the handle like a lifesaver. I'm Ruth, the woman exhaled. Names make strangers sit down. A teenager on a skateboard caught the scene and hopped off, offering his scarf. I'm Tyler, he said, chin high like courage. Evelyn looked at his board Tyler scrawled bold. Thank you, Tyler, she said, and watched him lengthen at the sound of himself. The post office line inched like a thoughtful hymn. A man patted empty pockets, short a few cents for stamps. Evelyn slid exact change forward without ceremony. For a letter that matters, she smiled. It's to my daughter, Carrie, he said, eyes bright with unshed. He stepped aside and wrote with steady care, each stroke a bridge. Evelyn remembered her own bridges waiting in a purse. God bless you, he murmured. He does, she said softly, on Tuesdays and on stamp lines. The clerk hid a grin. At Kroger, the self-checkout stalled for a frazzled dad with 1 gallon of milk and nowhere to be late. Go ahead, Evelyn waved, scanning her own comm. She tapped her card before he could argue. You just saved my morning, he laughed. Name's Brian. Jasmine at checkout saw the exchange and slipped a discount to a woman behind them who'd miscounted coupons. Pass it on, Jasmine mouthed. The woman caught it and nodded. A conductor cueing a quiet orchestra. Mercy loves a chain reaction. Evelyn pocketed the melody. The YMCA doors whooshed like good manners. She left a stack of soft towels at the donation bin and a note for the next swimmer finding her strength again. Derek waved from the desk. Sports Channel cheerful. Kara can check that key mystery at 8 tomorrow. The ribboned key hummed yes in her pocket at the library. Marla set out the story hour rug like a welcome mat for tiny feet. You free to read? She asked. Evelyn's yes surprised her with how ready it sounded. She chose a picture book and a parable to match. Ordinary Heroes. Aisle 3. She told the Good Samaritan, in kid-friendly words, neighbors of every stripe, help that crosses the road. Little faces tipped like flowers toward light. A grandma in the back dabbed her. Eyes, Catholics and evangelicals alike, nodded in the same language. A boy asked, Are heroes loud? Evelyn smiled. Sometimes they whisper and carry bread. Giggles bubbled like soda. She handed out bookmarks that said, Be strong and very kind. Tiny pockets hid big commandments. At the VA clinic, Frank sat on the bench, beard softer today. Eyes less stormy. Brought the good stuff, Evelyn said, holding up a thermos of hot cocoa. He took a sip and closed his eyes like prayer. You taste like Christmas, he declared. They laughed into the steam. You won't believe this, Frank added. But a stranger said to watch for you at the church when the weather turns. Evelyn's pulse took a thoughtful step. Which stranger? He shook his head. Voice like Sunday before the choir starts. The air leaned in. They wrote first names on a napkin. Frank, Joe, Carla, from reception so memories could grab a handle. Names help pain sit down, Evelyn said. Frank tucked the napkin into his coat like a ticket to better days. Hope found. A seat on the bench. At the diner, Linda had already launched a pay-it-forward chain. Pick a table, she whispered, sliding an envelope across. Inside, a 20 and a card that read, For whoever needs a yes today. Evelyn aimed it at a nurse in navy scrubs. The bell over the door ameened. They assembled care bags at the booth. Socks, granola, lip balm, a handwritten line. Seen, loved, not alone. Linda added peppermint because peppermint says, fresh start. The waitress tucked a bag for her cousin after chemo. Kindness made its own map. The shelter on Elm smelled like fresh paint and possibility. Angela at the desk wore a lanyard, full of keys and a face full of compassion. These will help, she said, hefting the bags. Soft things keep edges from cutting. Proverbs floated up gentle answers, turned away wrath. On Mrs. Alvarez's porch, the ribboned loaf landed. With a note bread again Wednesday, ride if you need. Inside, a hymn hummed through thin walls, 2 voices finding harmony. Evelyn prayed on the steps without labels, just love. The porch boards held the AMENS. By late afternoon, Neighbors began to notice the drift of good. Someone shoveled Evelyn's walk without asking. Another salted child placed a hand-drawn heart on her mailbox. For the lady who carries warm things, it read. Tenderness circled the block. Evelyn wrote a thank you to unknown friend and taped it to the lamppost. A teenager paused, read, and smiled like a secret. He later fixed a loose bolt on a neighbor's mailbox and left his own note. Couldn't help it. Goodness struggles to mind its own business. Back at home, she tucked a bike patch kit and a granola bar into a zip bag, just in case kindness asked for a field trip. The alley cat approved with a blink and a slow tail wave. She laughed, feeling younger at the edges. Mercy adds years in the right direction. Her phone buzzed with a wrong number. Mikey, a voice asked, hopeful, raw. I'm sorry, she said gently, and almost added, I know a Mikey. The line clicked off, leaving a small ache that pointed like a compass. Michael, not yet. But nearer. She held the letter, breathed slow, and set it back with care. Soon, she promised the paper and the future. The promise felt like a step taken without moving. Faith practices before the race. The kitchen light agreed. Clouds thickened, stacking like quilts in a storm closet. A weather alert crawled across the TV. Thunderstorm warning after sunset. Sirens scheduled for a test, or maybe the real thing. First Church would open its doors. As always, Evelyn's heart put on its shoes. Walk. The remembered voice breathed, warm and certain. She gathered candles, a spare sweater, a bag of rolls, and the care kits. The alley cat perched by the door like a small deacon. Outside, the wind rehearsed. On the sidewalk, her name rose again. Closer now, full as a choir note. Evelyn. She stopped not from fear, but recognition. Who are you? She asked into the darkening day. The wind held its breath and smiled. First, Church's red doors swung open as if they'd been expecting her. Inside, a few voices warmed up Amazing Grace, verse by verse. Lightning grumbled far off, like a distant train. Evelyn stepped across the threshold with bread in her arms and questions in her pocket. First Church breathed out warmth as the storm drew a dark circle around town. Red doors stood wide, like someone had flung hope open on purpose. Evelyn stepped in with bread under one arm and questions under the other. Candles trembled, brave and small. Curiosity took her coat. Ushers moved like kindness with clipboards, laying quilts across folding cots. A crockpot whispered soup in the fellowship hall. The choir gathered near the chancel, humming the Shape of Amazing Grace. Evelyn added her loaves to a growing hill of mercy. The room smelled like coffee and courage. A weather alert ticked. Across a transistor radio, letters crawling like ants with important news. Sirens tested, then stilled, then promised to return if needed. Families trickled in, eyes shiny with worry and relief. Someone handed out crayons at a table marked Kid Zone. Surprise sharpened the air and waited its turn. Father Thomas touched a shoulder here, a forehead there, quiet as a blessing. Pastor Jim unfolded chairs like punctuation marks for prayer. 2 traditions, 1 shelter, 0 competition. Evelyn felt safely bracketed by both. Unity gave the storm less room to shout. Near the narthex, her name arrived again, soft as wool. Evelyn. No echo, no theatrics. Just the sound of being known. She turned toward the vestibule light and saw nothing but dust motes auditioning for angels. The syllables lingered anyway, warm as a palm. She tied ribbons around care kits with the neatness of a nurse. Lip balm and socks tucked beside a handwritten line scene. Loved, not alone. Frank's name joined Joe's on a small list in her pocket. Lists are scaffolds when the heart is under construction. A grandmother shuffled in with a stroller and a schedule of worries. Evelyn caught the diaper bag before it hit the floor. I'm Ruth, the woman breathed. I'm Evelyn, she said, setting bread in a blanket within reach. Names shrunk. The storm by a measure you can feel. The choir found the melody and the sanctuary answered back. I once was lost. Rose into rafters that had seen their share of weather. Evelyn's voice blended without trying. Somewhere inside the harmony, her name threaded again, not sung, spoken. It steadied her like a pew rail. Lightning sketched. The stained glass in pale white, holy graffiti. The power hiccuped, then surrendered. A generator coughed to life in the basement. A faithful old mule. Candles took over the storytelling. Faces looked softer by FIRELIGHT. At a side table, someone arranged flashlights like a bouquet. Evelyn lit one candle and whispered, Lead me, simple as loaf and water. The wick answered with a gold room big enough for honesty. Catholics crossed themselves. Evangelicals whispered amen. Heaven nodded to both. In the narthex, a silhouette paused, tall and still as a decision. Evelyn stepped closer, breath measured. The figure slipped away into the dim, like a page turning itself. Only a draft remained, and a scrap of music that might have been memory. Frank appeared at the door. Beard rain-kissed, eyes clear. "Saved me a seat," he grinned. "Always," Evelyn said, pressing a thermos into his hands. Cocoa steam wrote comfort into the air. They shared a slice of quiet before it was needed elsewhere. "You won't believe this," Frank murmured, "but a man told me today. Look for Evelyn at the church when the weather turns. She'll bring what's warm." He chuckled. "Guess he knew you?" Evelyn felt the floor tip toward wonder and didn't grab for the rail. Father Thomas formed a small circle near the candles. "Our Father," he began, and voices joined. With 100 accents of need, Pastor Jim folded in a psalm, steady as a heartbeat, surely goodness and mercy. The storm tested the windows. The prayer held the walls. From the fellowship hall, the weather radio crackled like an old friend clearing its throat. "Rotation possible near the river and Cedar Bridge," the voice warned. The words lit up a map in Evelyn's chest. Cedar Bridge pulsed like a lighthouse behind her ribs. She carried care bags pew to pew, each delivery a small hallelujah. A nurse in navy scrubs took one with a grateful laugh. "You again," the nurse said. "Me again," Evelyn smiled. Repetition turned into reassurance, like a refrain you want stuck in your head. Jasmine from Kroger slipped through the door with a box of bottled water and coupon magic. Tyler the skateboarder held the door against the pushy wind. "Team effort," he joked, cheeks red with good. Evelyn introduced them to Ruth. Community remembered its lines. Her name came once more, closer, like someone standing just behind. "Mercy. 2 more steps," the voice suggested, warm as bread. Evelyn obeyed and found herself by the bulletin board. A single envelope waited, pinned by a brass tack like a note from the past. Inside lay a torn hymnal page with the words "Fear," not underlined, and initials at the corner R.M. Robert Miller. Her breath left, then returned with company. "Did you put this here?" she asked an usher. He shook his head. "Been up a minute or two at most." Surprise found a seat beside AEW. She set the page in her Bible, not as proof but as promise. Questions can sit quietly when hope is in the room. The storm rattled the gutters. Patience poured coffee. Evelyn refilled cups and felt steadier for serving. Pastor Jim tapped the mic that wasn't on and grinned at his mistake. "Would someone read Psalm 23? He asked. Father Thomas's eyes landed gently on Evelyn. She stood without thinking and read, voice even, breath prayer paced. The words fit the room like a tailored coat. After the amens, a woman with lavender perfume touched her sleeve. "Mrs. King," Evelyn gasped. 4th grade teacher, son in human form. "Saw Michael by the bridge a few weeks back." Mrs. King whispered looked well, said he was working things out. Evelyn held the news like a newborn miracle. Her knees went soft in the good way. Tears rose but didn't sting. "Thank you," she said. Each syllable a thank you note. Mrs. King squeezed her hand and drifted back into the pews like a saint in sensible shoes. Hope grew a size and didn't apologize. Wind banged the side door like a rude guest. They sang louder. A little girl named Grace asked, "Does God know my name too?" Evelyn knelt, eye to eye. "He knew it before you could say it," she said. Grace smiled like a lit candle and went to color. Skybluestorms.com. Evelyn felt a tug toward the vestibule again, subtle as a breath. She followed to the side door and found only rain and a note taped to the glassed on Cedar Bridge. Her pulse tapped yes, while her mind filed a protest. It didn't mean dot. Father Thomas announced a quiet vigil till first light. Pastor Jim organized a coffee rota like a general of gentleness. "We'll be here," he said, pointing to his heart and the sanctuary at once. Evelyn settled near the aisle with a blanket and a plan forming like dew. "Evelyn May," the voice said again, so close. It tilted into tenderness. She didn't ask who anymore. She asked where. The answer blossomed without sound bridge. Letter, sunrise. She tucked the envelope deeper, the way you protect what you intend to open. Thunder wandered off to find another conversation. The rain softened to a steady prayer against stained glass. People dozed, people wept, people healed a millimeter at a time. Evelyn watched the candles stand their ground. She checked the purse, letter, bookmarks, bus tokens, YMCA key humming like a patient. Secret. Kara would meet her in the morning about the lock that remembers. 2 paths pointed toward the same dawn. Bridges sometimes begin before you reach water. As the sky thought about light, she rose, careful not to wake the sleeping courage around her. She pressed the hymnal page against her chest, then tucked it safe. The red doors waited with their open-armed, yes. Outside, a thin silver edged the clouds. Evelyn stepped onto the church steps with bread to deliver, a letter to carry, and a name that kept finding her in the wind. The storm had said its piece. Hope cleared its throat. And somewhere east of town, Cedar Bridge waited with an answer that would not sound like any answer at Allen till it did. Dawn arrived like a held breath finally let go. The sky blushed pale over Cedar Bridge, and the river lifted a thin mist, like a prayer shawl. Evelyn's boots clicked on the planks, slow, listening. You won't believe what the morning had saved for her. Her name floated again, not loud, not shy, Evelyn. The sound traveled the rail and tucked itself under her scarf. She turned toward the eastern span. A figure waited where sun likes. To begin, "Good morning," the figure said, voice warm as fresh coffee, a county chaplain's jacket, a simple wooden cross, a smile that had seen weather. "I'm Daniel Avery," he added. "Folks call me Chaplain Dan. The timbre the Sunday before the choir starts. Kind." Curiosity stepped closer before fear could vote. "Have we met?" she asked. He shook his head, gentle. "Not yet. But I've been told your name more than once." The wind carried that sentence like a kite with a secret tail. "You told Frank to watch for me," she said, surprise pricking. He nodded. "And Jasmine, and Tyler with the skateboard, and the nurse in Navy. Long story." His smile held kindness with calluses. She felt something old unlock a little. He reached into his jacket and offered a weathered envelope. Her name, in Michael's handwriting, steady, grown, familiar, postmarked weeks ago. Addressed to the church, CO First Church Care Team. "Redirected," he said softly. "Found me instead of your mailbox." Evelyn's breath went thin. "How?" Chaplain Dan glanced at the river like it could answer. "Michael asked me months back to look out for his mom. No fuss. Just keep an eye." He wasn't ready for calling yet, but he was trying. The word trying tied a knot and held. "You won't believe this," he added, tapping the rail. "But that letter took a Tor Library Dropbox by mistake. Then the YMCA Lost and Found. Then our care desk. Your name stayed brave through it." Protection she never knew drew a circle around her feet. She slid a finger under the flap and paused. "Before I read," she said, Did you call my name?" "At Walgreens at church," he considered, then shook his head. "I spoke about you. I prayed your name, but the voice." He let the morning answer. A gull stitched the air. Somewhere, a truck downshifted on Maple. Evelyn held the envelope like a flame. "You don't want to waste." "He calls us by name," Chaplain Dan said. Eyes kind, different mouths, same mercy. The verse landed like a sparrow finding home. She opened the letter. The paper smelled like clean gin and cedar. "Mom," it began, printed steady. "I made a mess and I'm making mends. I'm not asking you to forget, just to let me try. I'll be at the Y mornings, working things out. Love, Michael." Tears rose but didn't sting. Surprise unfurled. Big as dawn and just as patient. "The Y? At what time?" she asked, careful to keep hope from galloping early. Dan smiled. "Right when the doors yawn. Manager's name is Kara. She's a good shepherd of lockers and lost things." Evelyn touched the ribboned key in her pocket. It hummed like a kept promise. "This," she said, showing it locker mystery. Don laughed, soft. "Wouldn't you know?" The bridge decided to hold steady under the weight of coincidence. Sliver of sun slipped the horizon a little farther. The river answered with gold like someone spilled mercy upstream. Evelyn read the next lines. "I left something for you in a safe place. If you want it. If not, okay, I'll keep showing up. Anyway, faith, trying on muscles." She exhaled long and shaking, then steadied. "He's alive," she said, as if the river needed the news. "He's trying." Dawn nodded. "And you are too." Hope took off its shoes and made itself at home. "Why?" "The bridge," she asked. "Why here?" Dan rested his hands on the rail. "He comes here at sunrise with a small crew trash bags, gloves, quiet talk. They call it the cleanup prayer. Pick up what doesn't belong. Leave the river better." "Then you found it." The image pierced her heart. Her boy with a black bag and a second chance, stooping to undo what the world had thrown away. "That sounds like him," she whispered. "That sounds like Grace with the job description." Footsteps approached. From the far end, she turned, pulse quick, but it was only a jogger with a bright beanie and a wave. The moment yawned and narrowed at once. "Not yet," the air said. Soon the rails echoed, almost kind. Chaplain Dan pulled a small card from his pocket. "He gave me this for you, in case I found you first." A bookmark. "Be strong and very kind," written in her own handwriting. Her breath snagged. "I left these at the library." Dan's eyes crinkled. "Guess seeds travel." She laughed, quick and young, and wiped a tear that didn't insist on drama. "Okay," she said to the morning, to the letter, to her knees. "Okay, Okay. The words settled like a bird that had been circling for years. They stood in a silence that worked like a doctor with good hands. Do you want me there? Dan asked. When you go to the Y. Evelyn weighed it. Walk me. To the door, she said. But I need to turn the knob myself. He nodded, loving the boundary. You're protected, he added, voice going low. Not from every hard thing, but from the lie that you're alone. I promised your husband I'd check in when I could. VFW Hall, winter after the funeral. He asked plain. The initials are M flickered like a lantern. Dot? Evelyn pressed the hymnal scrap in her coat. Fear not, underlined by a hand she knew. Protection she never knew turned out to have boots and a thermos and a calendar with reminders. She breathed thanks in both directions, heaven and earth. From beneath the rail, something white flashed, taped, weather tight. What's that? She asked. Dawn crouched, tugged gently, freed a small zip bag. Inside, a folded note. Her name on the outside? The river held still to listen. Mom, the note read, cramped with caution and hope. If you come to the bridge, I'm proud of you. If you can't, I understand. I'll be at the YMCA at 8 most mornings. Today, I'll be there early. Love, M. The word early glowed like color returning. Evelyn laughed and cried in the same breath, the way a body knows how to be whole. It's today, she said, gripping the rail. It's actually today. The bridge lifted her weight like a friend kneeling so you can climb the fence. She looked at Dan. Do I call first or just show up? He tilted his head. What? Did you promise at your kitchen table? She swallowed, remembering, forgive, fast, call by name, walk toward. I show up, she said, with bread, and my name. A pair of geese threaded the river, opinionated and faithful. The sun cleared the trees and touched the far bank. Then her face, warmth found the corners that winter had kept. Hope stopped, whispering, and spoke in a normal voice. Before we go, Dan said, will you let me pray? She nodded. He kept it simple, like the best prayers are. God who calls us by name, make straight what's crooked, soften what's brittle, carry what's too heavy. Amen. Catholics and evangelicals could have signed it together. They started back across the planks, step for step with the rivers. Quiet applause. The key in her pocket tapped a small rhythm 8. 8 like a drummer who knows the next song. Kara would be behind the desk with a map to a locker and a new page. At the bridge's end, Evelyn paused and looked back. Thank you, she told the air that had learned her name. The wind answered by smoothing her scarf and nudging her forward. The syllables Evelyn may softened like bread under a warm towel. She slipped her arm through Dan's, not from weakness. From gratitude, the path from the bridge to the Y looked shorter than it had an hour ago. The town opened its morning eye and found them on the move. Sirens stayed silent. Birds did their part. A delivery truck honked like a small blessing at the crosswalk. Evelyn tucked the letter deep and carried the note light. Courage kept pace without panting. Whatever happens, Dan said, you get to keep your name. She smiled, hearing the truth fit. And he gets to keep his, she added. Michael, not a wound. A person coming up the road. They turned onto High Street where the sun polished every window just enough. In the glass, she saw a woman who looked like herself and also knew her. The kitchen table Promise walked beside her in shoe leather outside the YMCA. Early risers drifted in with duffels and yawns. Derek waved through the glass, pointed toward the office and flashed a thumbs up. A sign on the door read, Welcome, back. Members, new start, any day. It felt like handwriting on the world. Evelyn stopped at the curb, hand on the door handle, breath steadying, ready. Dan asked. She nodded. I won't go further than the desk, he promised. Boundaries, again. Like guardrails that bless. She pushed the door, and warm pool air wrapped her in childhood. Chlorine and hope. Laughter bounced from tile to tile. Somewhere a whistle chirped like a bird that knows how to swim. Kara looked up. From a ledger, saw the key on the ribbon, and smiled like someone who enjoys solving gentle mysteries. You must be Evelyn, she said. The voice carried comfort and authority in equal parts. We've been expecting you. Evelyn held the key out. Locker. Kara nodded. And a small parcel in the safe, left by a young man with stormy blue eyes who said, Tell her I'm working things out. Surprise widened, then softened into Hope's favorite shape. From the hallway, a familiar timbre lifted low, steady, real, Mom. The syllable brushed the air like a hand. She turned toward it, name ready on her tongue, heart steady enough to carry both years and this second. And just before the moment fully broke over them, the world inhaled doors, tiles, river, bridge. Pusand held that breath one heartbeat. Longer, leaving a slim, bright edge for what the next step would reveal. The word Mom hung in the warm, chlorinated air like a lifeguard whistle held between breath and sound. Evelyn turned toward it, steady as she could be. A young man stepped from the hallway's blue light. Storm blue eyes, scruff of a new beginning. Shoulders that knew both weight and work. Her name rose inside her like sunrise. Michael, she said, not a question, a homecoming. The syllables fit her mouth, the way prayer fits a long day. He nodded once, as if agreeing with Mercy. They didn't rush. The space between them thinned and sweetened. The way dawn softens edges before it explains anything. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said, voice lower than she remembered, and truer. I almost didn't, she confessed, smiling with the honesty that makes honesty possible. But then your letter got stubborn and found me. They laughed, startled by the same kindness. Kara drifted closer with the ribboned key, gentle as a nurse. Whenever you're ready, she said, pointing toward the lockers. No hurry. Chaplain Dan held back by the desk, a sentinel who knew when to be scenery. Evelyn's gratitude nodded in his direction. They walked side by side down the tiled corridor, footsteps tapping a rhythm the heart understood. You look good, Mom, Michael ventured, half shy. You look like you, she replied, and watched relief move through his shoulders like warm water through cold pipes. Names kept them steady dot at the locker. The key turned with a small, sure click. Metal gave way to a neat shelf. A folded towel, a pair of clean gym shoes, a sandwich bag of quarters for the vending machines, and a small parcel wrapped in butcher paper and twine. For you, he said, palms open. She unwrapped the parcel. With the care of Sundays, inside lay a photograph. Sun faded at the edges, villain Robert and little Michael by the creek with a plastic boat. Tucked behind it, the missing shard from the chipped blue mug. I kept it, he said. I wanted to fix what I could. You won't believe what hope does with small pieces. She pressed the shard to the mug in her mind and felt the seam hold. Thank you, she breathed. 2 words that carried more freight than any speech could. Michael swallowed, eyes wet but steady. Grown men cry like that when the ground gets holy. I owe you apologies that won't fit in one morning, he said, hands fidgeting, then stilling. I owe you listening that doesn't try to fix you, she answered, smiling at how right. That sounded. They both nodded, both relieved to be poor at pretending. Can we sit? He asked, glancing at a bench by the trophy case. They sat shoulder to shoulder, not facing off, facing forward. A swim class laughed at a dropped kickboard. Life went on, decent and loud. That helped. He told her about the cleanup, crew at the bridge, the bags, the gloves, the stories told in sentences that knew when to quit. He told her about mornings at the Y when the pool steam felt like forgiveness. I'm not a finished story, he said. Neither am I, she replied. Truth shook both their hands. I left you a voicemail months back, he admitted, wince, gentle. I couldn't open it, she said, wince matching. Maybe we listen together. Not here, at the kitchen table that remembers us. The idea landed like a coat that finally fits. Chaplain Dan drifted over and pretended to check a bulletin board. Coffee's on me, he said without looking at them, which was its own tenderness. Michael grinned. That guy's been a shadow with. Good timing. Evelyn's laugh made room for gratitude. Kara appeared with 2 paper cups and a third for the chaplain who didn't ask. Houseblend, she said, then winked, and no charge. Catholics would have called it a grace. Evangelicals, a blessing. Heaven called it both and smiled. Mom, Michael began again, words choosing their shoes. I'm working the kind of steps that ask you to make things right. He didn't name the program or the pain. He didn't have to. I'm walking. The kind that meets you halfway, she answered. Isaiah's promise, hummed called by name, not by failure. He took a breath that sounded like a road, deciding to stay open. I never stopped being your kid, he said. I never stopped being your mom, she answered. Names settled there. Luggage on the floor and looked around like, we can live here. From the pool, a coach blew a whistle that didn't rush anyone, just guided. Evelyn heard her own name again, not in the room, but through it. Evelyn May wrapped the moment without crowding it. She glanced toward Dan. He just nodded, as if recognizing a familiar friend. I've been praying your name for a long time, Michael said, eyes down, then up. Maybe that's what I heard, she replied, half wonder, half certainty. Maybe it's someone who never needed reminding. Hope didn't argue. Hope never has to. They walked back to the front where sunlight pooled on the lobby floor. Derek did a cheesy double thumbs up that somehow didn't embarrass anyone. Locker mystery solved. He called solved enough, Michael said, glancing at his mom with a smile that understood chapters. At the desk, Kara slid a small padded envelope across. Left for you, she told Evelyn. Inside was the YMCA guest pass from years ago with Robert's signature on the back. In his hand, a note. If you ever need a place to start again, start where water remembers. Mercy dated itself and still felt current. I miss him, Michael said softly. A boy and a man in the same sentence. Me too, she answered, and they let the ache stand between them like an honest friend. Grief didn't leave. It learned its manners. Can we walk to the diner? He asked. Pie for breakfast sounds like strategy. She laughed. Linda will faint from joy. The plan put its shoes on. Outside Maple Street looked freshly washed by last night's storm. They passed the library, and Marla waved a bookmark like a flag. Story hour this Friday, she called with frogs. Michael chuckled. You still make small people love big words, he said. They teach me how, she answered. Wisdom kept its voice low. On Cedar, they slowed by First Church. The red doors were propped open, the sanctuary airing out the night. Father Thomas swept the steps like a bishop with a broom. Pastor Jim hauled trash with the grin of a man who loves verbs. You're seen, their presence said without a sound. You won't believe this, Michael murmured. But I think I heard my name here too. Once, when I was nowhere near ready. Evelyn squeezed his arm. He's patient, she said. And he has your middle name, right? That earned a smile that reached his eyes. At the diner. Linda didn't faint, but she did cover her mouth and clap once like a child at fireworks. Look what God threw at my Tuesday, she whispered, to no one in particular. Pie appeared, coffee arrived, and the bell over the door signed the receipt. Conversation tiptoed between apology and ordinary work hours. The cleanup crew. How to fix a mug with food-safe glue, whether Mrs. Alvarez preferred wheat or white. They said each other's names often like anchors you test before the tide returns. The air in the booth learned to breathe with them. Michael pulled a folded paper from his pocket, edges softened by hoping. My amends list, he said, not ashamed. You're at the top, with bold letters. She tapped the paper gently. Let's write a new list beside it, she proposed. Call on Sunday nights, bridge on Saturdays when the weather plays nice. Church potluck, when the calendar forgets we're busy. They wrote, not rules, but rhythms. Bless the neighbor in chemo. Buy extra socks for the VA bench. Return the library cart of frogs to the right shelf. Listen before fixing. Pray out loud sometimes, and in quiet always. Small vows that matched their feet. Evelyn slid the napkin list into her purse beside the letter that had traveled by Grace. Kitchen table meeting tonight, she asked. Voicemail and glue, he replied. They both smiled at the courage in such domestic words. Home had a to-do that mended. On the sidewalk, the wind braided their scarves without asking permission. I'll walk you to the corner, Michael said, as if rehearsing for future leavings that would not feel like loss. I'll walk you to the bridge next time, she answered. Open loops made friends with open roads. They paused by the lamppost where Evelyn had taped her thank you to an unknown friend. The paper had collected new note scribbles from neighbors who'd been caught by kindness. Couldn't help. It one read. Me neither, Michael said, and the echo fit. Before they parted at the crosswalk, Evelyn placed her hand over his. You are called by name, she said, voice gentle and iron strong. Not by your worst day, not by your best day, by the one who made you and by the mother who will not stop loving you. He nodded, receiving, storing, believing. The light changed. They hugged the way people do who have spent seasons practicing absence. No parade, no speech, just a long yes. The alley cat inspected their ankles and approved. Tonight, he said. Kitchen table. Tonight, she echoed. The word chimed like a small bell that knows bigger bells exist. He headed toward the Y, she toward Maple Street. Both carried bread in different forms. As she walked, her name came again. Evelyn May, the way it had by Walgreens by the church. By the bridge. Only now it sounded like a promise spoken from inside her own courage. She smiled, let it settle, and saved a seat for whatever came next. Back at the house, she set the mug shard on the counter and the photo by the stove. She found the glue and read the label twice, because some repairs deserve patience. The kettle, clicked on the table, remembered it had rooms left. She glanced at the phone and didn't flinch. The voicemail would have its turn at the exact right time, not as a judge, as a door. She lit a candle, whispered the prayer that fits every season. Mian felt the room nod. Outside. A truck rumbled. A child laughed. A flag clicked brave against its pole. The town took a deep, ordinary breath. Evelyn laid 2 plates on the table, and a napkin in the third place where hope sits. Somewhere, a choir rehearsed a familiar hymn and left a verse unfinished on purpose. Sometimes the moment that changes, everything doesn't roar. It whispers your name in a grocery aisle, in a church pew, on a bridge at first light. If Evelyn's walk stirred something in you, some ache, some yes, take it as a nudge. Start small. Call one person by name today. With kindness that lands and stays, write the letter. Light the candle. Let mercy come wearing ordinary shoes. You don't have to fix every yesterday to open one door tonight. Maybe your cedar bridge is a kitchen table, a front porch, a hospital hallway, or the driver's seat parked outside someone's house. What if hope is already waiting there, patient as a friend with warm bread? What if the voice you've been missing is closer than your next breath? Here's a gentle challenge. Before the day ends, make one move toward healing. Send the message. That blesses, not wins. Leave a loaf on a doorstep. Pray a simple prayer. Lead me and watch how the road straightens a little. And when you're ready, listen for your name, the way heaven says it, not as a label, but as a promise. Have you ever felt called by name, like that quiet, unmistakable? Who is your Michael? What would your first small step look like? A voicemail, a walk, a pie at the diner, a visit to a bridge at dawn. If you were Evelyn for a day, what would you do next? If this story touched your heart, I'd love to keep walking with you. Consider subscribing and gently tapping the bell, no pressure. Just a warm invitation, so you won't miss the next chapter. We'll explore together. Our little community of brave hearts is growing, and there's a seat saved for you.